Hello and welcome to another episode of the Blueprint Roundtable. Today I will be your host, and I've got Matt Lewers with me and Charles Brotman, who are our Blueprint Roundtable guest. And what we're going to be discussing is the question of, can someone be overqualified for a role that they apply for? So I'll start with you, Matt.
If you would have asked me
What
3
is your
years ago, I
thoughts?
would have said no. I don't believe in it. But I have different thoughts now. I think the short answer for me would be yes, you can be overqualified for a role. Um, Unfortunately enough, I think whether you're overqualified for what they need for the role could be different. But I think the perception would be that you're overqualified. Some of those examples are people that are coming from like C-level or head of or VP roles, and they're applying for entry-level IC roles. I see that all the time, especially in today's world. So I think that's an area where they would be considered overqualified, especially if that was a meaningful, higher-level senior role, and now they're trying to find something entry-level. And unfortunately, a lot of those people don't get a chance to explain themselves on a phone call because they're just going to get DQ'd by internal or external recruiters. And then I think there's another cohort where people overqualify themselves. And these are people that have longer tenure in the workforce and they feel the need to explain all of their experience, or they get long-winded. We've all said this, but they talk about everything instead of just focusing on what's important for the role at hand. And if, as a recruiter or a hiring manager, your eyes start to glaze over during an about me pitch, then you're basically whatever gets tagged in the ATS is not the candidate's not a fit. Ultimately, that person's probably thinking they're overqualified and this is just not the right fit.
Wait, Matt, I've got a question. Going to the first example, are you saying that this is what happens, like, and people are making these decisions not to look at senior candidates
Yes.
applying for IC roles because of that narrative? Or are you saying, I think we all know, I agree it happens. Are you saying it's warranted to happen in some of these
Yeah, I do.
situations too?
After having conversations with a lot of these candidates in these situations, yes, I do think that they are overqualified and they perhaps it's hard for me to buy in that somebody's going to be a strong role fit to, for example, somebody that has not carried an individual quota, has not done outbound prospecting for their own number, their individual number, and let's call it 6 years or more. I have a hard time believing that they are going to want to, and two, be successful at doing that, especially for an entry level role nowadays. I just don't see the skill set or the mindset transitioning well. And there may be some bias there, and that would apply to me. I haven't had an individual quota now in 5 years, right? But I would be hard pressed probably to get an entry level sales position because somebody would look at me and say, this person's had a director or above title for 5 years and they were sales lead for 7 out of 9 years in their sales experience. I don't want this person, right? And I think I'm overqualified for that type of role.
Interesting. Well, yeah. So jumping in, I think the term has become so synonymous with problematic hiring, often rife with age bias, and certainly, Matt, I know that's not something that characterizes any of your work, but I think it's lost a lot of its value and utility. And actually, kind of picking up where you left off there, because I've known a lot of leaders who've successfully gone back into being individual contributors, and I would sort of distinguish between the valid point of assessing, do these leaders have the skills and competencies required to execute in that IC role, i.e., are they capable of prospecting? Like, because if to your point, if it's been 5 or 10 years, right? Maybe they need to be assessed for that. Maybe they need to be run through a role player exercise to see can they execute, versus when you talk about entry level roles, which are not IC roles, and most are not in sales entry level. I do think there is a legit question if someone is applying for like an inbound SDR role, like
Right.
Yeah.
will they be fulfilled? And that is a legitimate question. But I think rather than assuming that they are overqualified, hiring managers need to have the conversation and encourage the recruiters to have the conversation. And so, whenever we're making assumptions about people's motives, it gets to be a slippery slope into things that we want to avoid in hiring. So I think in general, I understand why that the term has survived, but I think it's lost a lot of its value. And ultimately, we're better served in not making assumptions about people's motives and not making assumptions about their sort of narrative inclinations. But I hear you as well.
So let me ask you this question because I see like the perspectives on both sides. So let's say you have, just throwing this out there, an SDR role that's open, right? It's an entry level role. And you have a lot of inbound applicants that match what you're looking for. They don't really have much experience, right? But they kind of fit the profile or job description on the head. And then you have someone who, let's say it was Matt, right? Matt has applied for this role. Now we know Matt, right? But the people looking at this don't. When you have all these applicants that kind of meet what you want, and then you have someone that has gone so far beyond that role in the sense of where their skills and behaviors have developed, well, what would you tell a hiring manager to do in that case when you have someone that clearly has those skills, but the question is probably, are they going to be fulfilled? Or say, do you actually spend time having that conversation when you've got all of these other ones that you need to go through?
Is that question to me to start or Matt?
Anyone?
Um,
First.
I'll go. I thought it was at me since I think Matt's partially
you do
answered. I mean, you have the conversation. First of all, how often do we actually see someone of Matt's caliber apply for that kind of role? Not very often. I actually would argue that how we do often see candidates that have maybe 20 years of sales experience in different industries and their questions, and that's where I think overqualified just becomes a convenient way, like not to really assess for other skills, because that's where I think age bias tends to lurk.
Yes.
This person's like an old timer, right? But if I say overqualified, now Matt, how often do we see that? Rarely. So if that happens, I'm kind of curious. Maybe he's got a passion for what we're doing in the market. I'll tell my screener and recruiting partner, yeah, have the 30-minute conversation and ask what piqued his interest in this opportunity given his career. If he has a good answer for it, I'll move him forward. If not, it's not the best alignment.
Totally. Matt, any
No, I mean,
additional
I think I would
perspective on that?
want to have a conversation with the candidate to see what their motivations are. Perhaps there's a better fit for them elsewhere that they maybe just are unaware of. That being said, I would still probably prioritize candidates that fit the neat little box on the requirements more like directly, if that's a good answer. Because a lot of times, if that's what the hiring manager is looking for as a third-party recruiter, that's what I'm going to put forward, because that's going to accelerate everybody's timelines, as opposed to, you only get, I know we've all thought about this, you only get so many like strikes, right? And if maybe that candidate that Chuck's talking about, me in this scenario, maybe I BS really well and I get past Chuck, and then the hiring manager absolutely rips me apart or doesn't like any of my responses, then it's a strike, and it's, hey, Chuck or Matt went off target here and tried to put some candidate in front of me that doesn't really kind of fit the niche of what I'm looking for. So let's not do that again, right? Like that, you start to have those conversations if you start to stray too far, especially in today's economy, from what hiring managers are looking for. So.
Yeah, for sure. Look, I think anytime that we try to like make things black and white, it doesn't serve us well as like a human race, right? Like my biggest takeaway at this point in my life as I've grown up is like things are so much more gray than I've in all aspects than I've ever realized, right? And there are, we did a roundtable a while ago, which, is it a red flag if people go from manager to IC, right? And there's a lot of folks that like some of your best ICs are managers because they're like, they know how to be organized and everything. But and they have a lot of skill. They're going to be a lot easier to manage because they understand the challenges of being a manager, right? And I think, but then in the case of like, if you have a VP of sales applying to an SDR role, it's separate from their title, right? If I see like a bunch of short stints all over the place, that is more of a red flag of this person is constantly moving. Will they stay here? Which is totally separate from their role, right? Of just like, are they going to stay? And so I think we have to be like less dismissive probably and more thoughtful, but it kind of falls on both sides of what you all have said, but in different scenarios to that extent, right? Like I think age bias is a really real thing, and this thought of like they won't stay here, or but most importantly is if you think that they can't do the job because they've been out of it for too long, um, it's kind of making sure you're not making assumptions um, too far in without, clarifying. But not an overly easy thing to tackle depending on how many applicants you get, but all great points. So,
True.
well, that is all the time we have for today. But until next time, we'll see you later. Thanks.